Part 1. You will hear a woman talking to a man who is interested in joining the language workshop. First, you have some time to read questions 1 to 5. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning, Hampstead Language Workshop. Evelyn speaking. How may I help you today?
Hello there. My name's Jacob, and I'm interested in joining your language workshop.
Wonderful, Jacob. We can certainly help you with that. We do have a membership application form. If you like, we can complete it together over the phone right now, and you can ask any questions you might have as we go.
That'd be great. I've got a few minutes free, so let's get started.
Perfect. I'll begin by taking down your full name.
It's Jacob Help.
Right, so is it Hill?
Yes, exactly.
Now, could I please have your email address?
Sure. It's Jacob H_1998 at reading.com.
So is it Jacob H then, underscore you said?
Yes, it's JACOBH_1998 at reading.com.
Perfect. Now, you mentioned you live in Westford, correct?
That's right.
I'll need your house number and street name so we can send any postal materials. Some of our workshop guides go by regular mail.
I'm currently renting at 84 Greenwood Avenue. It's near the community library in Westford.
Got it. 84 Greenwood Avenue, Westford. Thanks, Jacob. Next, how did you hear about our workshop? I mean, did you see our ad online, perhaps, or through a friend?
Well, actually, I heard about it from one of my former classmates. She took a course with you last spring and recommended me to look into it.
Oh, fantastic. Word of mouth is always lovely to hear. Now, could you tell me why you're looking to join our workshop?
The main reason is that I want to improve my creative writing. I've been writing short stories, and I'd love some professional feedback.
That's wonderful. We have weekly writers' meetups, and we do focus on both academic and creative language skills. Now, for the type of membership, we offer a few options. There's our basic membership at £25 per year, which allows you to attend the monthly lectures. We also have the advanced membership at £40, which includes the lectures plus additional workshops each term. And finally, the full membership at £50, which gives you access to everything, including our annual writing retreat.
I'm torn between advanced and full, but given my schedule, I think I'll stick to the advanced membership for now.
That's a great choice. You can always upgrade later if you want to join the retreat or any extended programs.
Before you hear the rest of the recording, you have some time to read questions 6 to 10. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 6 to 10.
Excellent. Now, I'd like to get a sense of what kinds of courses you might be interested in. We have a series of mini competitions and modules throughout the year. Some people enter them to get feedback on their work. Have you ever joined any contests or language competitions before?
I've done a few creative writing competitions in the past. Actually, I entered 3 different ones over the last 2 years, and I picked up some helpful comments from the judges, even though I never placed first.
That's great. Could you tell me a bit about them?
Sure, my first competition was called Nighttime Tales.
Oh, that sounds intriguing. So, what was the requirement?
The instructions were to write a story that took place entirely after sunset, so it had to have that moody evening setting. I ended up writing about a family in a small town during a power outage, but the judges said my plot was too complicated. They felt it was confusing for readers, and so they denied me the chance.
Ah, so the complexity was the issue. Right. That's something we can certainly help you refine in our advanced storytelling workshops.
That's right. Now, moving on. The second one was a competition about exploring different cultures.
So you had to incorporate multicultural elements, perhaps?
Exactly. The requirement was to depict at least 2 different traditions or customs in a short piece. I was really happy with the concept, but the judges said that my character dialogue was unrealistic.
Dialogue can be tricky, especially if you're mixing languages or cultural references.
Yes, that was definitely part of the challenge.
Indeed. And what about your third competition? Did you find it equally challenging?
Yes, it was an event called Poetic Translations.
Interesting. Did you have to write a poem in 2 languages or something like that?
Almost. I had to translate an old folk poem into modern English and then add my own creative twist. The feedback was that my language was a bit too formal for a modern version, so I'll pay attention to tone next time.
That's such a valuable experience. We'll be happy to have you on board in our workshop, and I'm certain you'll get even more out of our membership. I think we've got everything we need. Did you have any more questions for me?
That is the end of part 1. You now have some time to check your answers. Now turn to part 2. Part 2. You will hear from an expert on sea fishing safety, talking on a radio. First, you have some time to read questions 11 to 14. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Hello everyone and welcome to our Outdoor Pursuits series. This evening we're joined by Jake Morrison, an experienced marine biologist and angler who's just finished writing a comprehensive book called Sea Fishing Safely and What You Need to Know. Jake will be talking us through some of the dangers you need to watch out for when fishing off the coast, particularly around hazardous fish. Over to you, Jake.
Thank you, Lena. I'm delighted to share my knowledge with all of you. Whenever I speak on this topic, I have to start with safety, because sea fishing can expose you to species that might look harmless, but are actually very poisonous or capable of inflicting painful stings. The first thing to keep in mind is that you should never handle an unfamiliar fish without proper protective gloves. Even if you believe it's a non-venomous species, mistakes happen, so better safe than sorry. The second point, and I see many beginners ignore this, avoid fishing in areas where toxic waste or sewage may flow into the sea. Contamination can affect not just the water, but the fish themselves. Now, I want to clear up a few misconceptions. Some anglers think all fish with bright colouring are deadly, and conversely, that dull or grey fish are entirely safe. Neither belief is accurate. Some highly venomous fish have very plain colours, while certain harmless species may be brilliantly hued. Another popular myth is that if you find a fish washed up on the shore and seabirds won't touch it, it must be poisonous. However, there are cases where birds simply can't access or recognize the fish as food, and it might still be perfectly safe for humans. So judging toxicity by how local wildlife responds can be misleading. Finally, people often think cooking thoroughly will remove all toxins. This is not true with certain species like pufferfish, where the poison remains in specific organs even after high heat.
Before you hear the rest of the recording, you have some time to read questions 15 to 20. Now listen carefully and answer questions 15 to 20.
So moving on, what more can you advise about sea fishing to our listeners?
Sure. Now, where should you actually do your sea fishing? Many people think you must charter a boat and go far offshore for the best catch. While that can be an exciting adventure, if you lack a big budget or can't handle rough waters, fishing off a public pier or a breakwater in a well-known harbour can be an excellent start. The real key is to arrive early, especially if you're hoping for less competition and calmer conditions. If you turn up at midday, there might be a crowd of anglers occupying the best spots, and in some areas the fish are already disturbed by too many lines in the water. Ultimately, the transition from fishing to growing your own food requires a lot of conversation. For those just starting, I strongly advise you not to rely completely on phone apps to identify what you catch. The photos in the database may not always be clear, and some fish, especially juvenile ones, look very different from their adult forms. Remember, you could also lose phone reception or battery. The safest approach is to go out with an experienced fishing club or a local guide who can show you precisely how to handle each species. This hands-on mentorship will give you confidence, plus you'll learn about local regulations. Now, a word about conservation. Overfishing is a serious issue, and it's not just about large commercial trawlers. Recreational anglers, if they're careless, can also contribute to the problem. Make it a rule to release smaller fish that haven't had a chance to reproduce. There's no point in keeping tiny catches you don't need. That way, you help maintain healthy fish populations for the next generation, and of course, adhere to any local size or bag limits. It's also critical that you don't leave discarded fishing lines or hooks lying around. Many sea creatures, including birds, can become entangled and die from these hazards. Sadly, some areas have seen a decline in certain fish varieties. You might assume it's just because so many seafood restaurants want exotic fish. While that's partly true, The bigger issue is coastal development. Over the last few years, there's been an increase in residential and commercial building along shorelines, which disturbs vital spawning grounds and impacts the water quality. These construction projects can create barriers to migration routes, reduce seagrass beds, and ultimately reduce fish numbers. Let's discuss handling and storage once you catch a fish. When you land a fish, venomous or not, immediately place it in a sturdy container or cooler box. If it's a species you suspect might have toxic spines, don't grab it with your bare hands. Use a pair of tongs or a landing net designed for spiny fish. After that, get the fish on ice as soon as possible. Keep it chilled for no more than 2 days if you plan to eat it. Anything beyond that, and you risk spoilage or even bacterial growth. As for cooking and eating new species, a lot of people get so excited when they catch something unusual that they prepare a massive meal and invite friends over. I always suggest trying small portions first, especially if you've never had that type of fish before. Some individuals can experience allergic reactions or discomfort, even with fish that's considered safe. And of course, make sure you remove all potentially dangerous parts, if applicable. Alright, that's the overview. Now let's explore some specific cases.
That is the end of part 2. You now have some time to check your answers. Now turn to part 3. Part 3. You will hear a student discussing with a counselor at the university. First, you have some time to read questions 21 to 25. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hiya, Stephen. It's been a while since I last saw you. How are you getting on?
Not too bad. Thanks for your help last time. I managed to speak to my tutor, as you suggested, and solved the problem with timetable clashes. And I also went to see the accommodation officer. She was great, and she helped me a lot with the problems I was having with our landlord.
That's good to hear. Well done you for getting things sorted out. So, why did you need to see me?
Well, I need some advice to help me manage my time better. I've been here for 6 months now, and my friends are having no problem getting down to work and finishing assignments. But I always seem to leave things to the last minute. I try not to do that, but it's the same every time. I end up only just being able to get essays in on time. It's really stressing me out.
Well, that is a problem, but don't be too hard on yourself. A lot of the students I see struggle with time in the same way, especially students who've come straight from school and are used to having everything organised for them by their teachers. Now, why don't you tell me about a typical day? Maybe we'll be able to identify any habits you have that aren't helping. Then we can see how you can change those habits.
Well, during the first few weeks at uni, I was going out every night till late, getting to know people and making new friends. But I'm not doing that too often now. I don't want to spend all my money. That would be another problem. Apart from 1 or 2 evenings a week, I tend to be on my own in my room, so it's not as if I don't have enough time to study and do my work. But I find it difficult to prioritise, and I end up doing nothing at all. That's why it's always a bit of a panic with assignment deadlines. I leave things till the last minute and it's always a rush. And lately, the books and materials I need are never in the library because they've all been taken by other students.
Before you hear the rest of the recording, you have some time to read questions 26 to 30. Now listen carefully and answer questions 26 to 30.
OK. Well, look, we've got lots of help sheets here to deal with issues like this. Personally, I think it's best to deal with problems one step at a time, rather than setting too many challenges. Let's focus on time management. Do you have one of those big wall calendars? You know, the huge poster calendars with all the days, months, etc. on them?
No, but I've seen them on sale in the student shop, so I should be able to get one.
Good. While you're there, buy yourself a diary as well. A big one, so you have plenty of space to write in it.
OK, so what do I do when I have them?
Well, you tell me. How do you think the calendar might come in useful?
I could use that to put in term dates, assignment deadlines, the dates of any presentations I've got to give, that kind of thing.
That's it. A calendar is perfect for giving you an overview of the year ahead, so you won't forget key dates and what you might need to be thinking about longer term. Now, what about the diary?
I don't know really. I could put in things I have to do each day. If it's 1 page per day, I could write down how I'm feeling, that kind of thing.
I think it's best to use it to structure the week. Sit down with it on a Sunday evening and start with all the things you have to do that week. For example, you might write Wednesday, lecture, 9 to 11. Thursday, seminar, 12 o'clock. Friday, first draft of essay. Do you see what I mean? That'll give you an overview of the week ahead.
Yes, I can see how that would help. I tend to keep information like that in my head, so it's not surprising things get forgotten.
OK, but you should also write a to-do list. Before you go to bed every night, have a look through the diary for the rest of the week and write a list of things you could try to do the next day to help you with some of those tasks. Don't be overambitious and try to do too much. Prioritise what's important and think about what can wait until the following day or later in the week.
Yes, I like that idea. It'll be a good reminder. I just need to decide what things are more important than others.
Well, you'll get better with practice. And doing this will also give you the sense that you're in control of your life and your studies.
OK, so let me make sure I've got this. I start with the big picture. The calendar for what's ahead over the weeks and months, then plan my week with the diary and finally decide what I need to do each day.
Exactly. Do you think you can manage that?
Hopefully, yes. It seems pretty straightforward. Thanks for your help.
That is the end of part 3. You now have some time to check your answers. Now turn to part 4. Part 4. You will hear a lecturer giving a speech on neuroplasticity. First, you have some time to read questions 31 to 34. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 34.
Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to look at a topic that you'll no doubt have read about on your favorite self-help or psychology blogs and websites, and that topic is neuroplasticity. It's an issue that's caught the attention of psychologists as it opens up the possibility of treating patients in ways that we might once have thought were impossible. Neuroplasticity refers to the way the brain is able to adapt over the course of our lives as a result of our experiences and interactions with our environment. The opinion held years ago was that the brain was an organ that grew and developed until adulthood, at which point it stopped generating new cells, and the way it worked or operated became fixed. So, for example, if someone suffered a brain injury of some kind, scientists believed the damage was permanent, and the most anyone could hope for was to limit the damage to the brain and prevent more damage from taking place. However, more recently, scientists have proved that our brains aren't hardwired like a computer at adulthood, and that the neurons, the cells in our brain, can reorganize. For example, if we learn a new skill like playing the guitar, new connections are created between neurons. As we go through life, we're effectively rewiring our brains. People who can see receive information about the world from their eyes. This information is sent via the optic nerve to the part of the brain called the visual cortex. In blind people, the visual cortex doesn't get any information from the eyes. But one scientist, Paul Bacchi-Rita, thought the brains of blind people might be able to get this information from another part of their body, their skin. In a number of experiments, he used various techniques to stimulate the skin on their backs. Amazingly, the blind people began to say they experienced seeing. Later, brain scans showed that the information the brain was getting from the skin was being processed in the visual cortex. It seems their brains had formed new connections between neurons in a way nobody would have believed possible in the past. Another example that's often quoted is a study carried out on cabbies, the drivers of London's famous black taxis. To pass the tests to become a London cabbie, people must spend years learning all the roads and possible routes around the city. Scientists discovered that the area of the brain responsible for memorizing all this actually became larger. Interestingly, it became larger than that of London bus drivers, who don't have to memorize the same information but simply follow the same route.
Before you hear the rest of the recording, you have some time to read questions 35 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 35 to 40.
It seems that certain activities can promote neuroplasticity. When we travel, our brains are stimulated by new experiences, and new connections between neurons are triggered. Connectivity can also be enhanced through memory training activities, which can certainly help people as they get older. And whether you are left or right-handed, doing exercises using the other hand can, over time, have a similar effect. Even the simple act of reading fiction is said to be beneficial. It's not surprising to learn that the phenomenon of neuroplasticity is regarded as having the potential for miracle cures for people who are struggling with physical and mental problems. It's natural that our hopes are raised when we hear of people recovering from serious brain injuries, or stories about how we can alter undesirable personality traits. The idea that negative thinkers can develop a more positive outlook, that we can change our personalities as a consequence of our plastic brain and do or be whatever we want to, is very appealing. However, there are several reasons why we should be cautious and maintain a realistic view of what's possible. As psychologists, we need to question some of the claims being made about neuroplasticity. Such changes, as have been observed, don't come about without a great deal of effort. For example, people who have lost the use of an arm following a brain injury would need to do specific physical exercises thousands of times for the brain to make new neural connections. And even then, there's no guarantee of success. And research showing that activities like learning a second language have an effect on neural connections is very interesting. But I don't think this supports the idea that the phenomenon of neuroplasticity can be used in a wonder treatment for people with physical or mental ailments. I'd argue that just like the patient learning to regain the use of an arm, such achievements require a tremendous amount of effort. They aren't something that can be achieved overnight. Neither can we ignore the effect of age. What's possible for a younger person might not be achievable for an older one. And then there's the effect of our genes and how these might limit the degree of plasticity our brains are capable of. Nevertheless, this is a fascinating area of science for anyone interested in psychology, and one that I'm sure you'll hear a lot more about during your studies and later on in your professional lives.
That is the end of part 4. You now have some time to check your answers.